Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Glad that you could join us to our evening, a conversation with Ray McGuire and Michel Martin on behalf of ClassACT 79, our members, and lots of other friends as well. Tonight, you're going to hear from Ray McGuire, HR 79 and HLS MBA 84. He's being interviewed by award-winning journalist Michel Martin, HR 80. I'm Dorian Nunez, HR 7980 and HBS 84. And it's my pleasure to host this event with my freshman roommate, Ray McGuire, and my St. Paul School classmate, Michel Martin. But first, here's a 60-second overview of ClassACT 79. And as always, we'll see if the PowerPoint works, right? So there you go. ClassACT 79 brings classmates together to address in a respectful, nonpartisan, or multi-partisan manner ways that we can tackle problems, create supportive change, and further nurture relationships, which has really happened with everyone here that's part of ClassACT 79. ACT stands for Achieving Change Together, so that we can come together, collaborate, and create positive change greater than if we were acting separately. So if you're involved in nonprofits and other causes, you should let us know. This is our initial leadership group. I won't go through everyone's name for the sake of time, but I will point out that this may be the first time some of you have seen Rachel Kemp, who has been our class secretary for 40 years, and you've seen her name all over the place. So she's been part of this effort, and her leadership has been very helpful. Everyone on this slide has done tremendous work behind the scenes. Some of us didn't know each other before this project, but we're acting together and we know each other pretty well now. I have to say this: we do not endorse political candidates or movements, but we consider it a matter of public interest to hear from and feature classmates that are running and holding public office. I'm going to repeat that so that there's no confusion. ClassACT HR 79 does not endorse political candidates or movements, but we consider it a matter of public interest to hear from and feature classmates running for political office. So welcome to this particular conversation with Ray McGuire, HR 79. And these are sort of the rules. Enter your questions in Q&A. A lot of them were submitted when you registered, and so the chat function is turned off. At the end, we hope that you'll take a moment to answer a short poll at the end of the event. It's one question. Don't worry about that. And if you want to be involved in future events, that's our email below, classacthr79@gmail.com. So for more information, you can go to our website. You obviously know where it is because you registered, and you can contact us via Gmail, and that's the Gmail address. On that note, it's my pleasure and my honor to turn this over to your host for the evening, our very own Harvard award-winning journalist, Michel Martin. Michel.
Dorian, thank you. Can I see my, oh, there he is. Okay, great. Hello, everybody. Dorian, Rachel, the whole group, thank you for letting me crash your 79 house party. Let me say that I'm going to proceed with this interview as I would any other. There are no preconditions. We have had no conversations in advance. I'm going to ask whatever I want to ask, and Ray can answer however he wants to answer. And the same for you. Ask whatever you want to ask. We're all grown-ups. I have a bit of ground to cover, so I apologize if I interrupt a bit to move things along. I'm going to save 3 to 5 minutes at the end, so Ray can give us all a closing thought. I like to do this because, let's just face it, opening statements are never that great. And also, people tend to sort of wander into the chat. So this way, I feel like he will have all of our undivided attention at the end of the evening, and he can kind of leave us with a closing thought. And with that being said, Ray, hello. Say hello to the people.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Dorian, my freshman class roommate, along with Claude and Willie. It is great to see you. And I got to tell you, I am in conversation with one of the smartest people on the planet. When Michel shows up, it's a whole different level. So I haven't spoken to her in a while. It is great to see you. I mostly see you on my big screen, Michel. So it's great to see you. And I trust that your family and you are keeping well, as well as your roommates, whom I remember. So thank you for having me. I am excited to be here.
All right, so let's do it. So give me the short version. You're born in Dayton, How did you get to Hotchkiss and then to Harvard?
Dayton, born in Dayton, other side of the tracks, across the street from the hard paper mill. Emitted fumes sometimes so strong that the only way he could breathe is to open the refrigerator door. Mother, social worker, raised by my mother and grandparents, didn't know my dad. Mother sacrificed, as we all know, to get me a good education. I went from my neighborhood. I walked 3/4 of a mile to a mile to go to a school that my 5th grade teacher told me about to get a scholarship, which I got. And from 6th grade to 11th grade, I was at the school, the Miami Valley School. Teacher said, if you're as good as they say you are, go test yourself against the big boys and girls in the East. I said, where are they? I took a Greyhound bus around New England by myself, looking for schools, and landed in Lakeville, Connecticut at the Hotchkiss School. Applied to 6 colleges. All, I didn't have the money to pay for a college application, so I guess they waived the fees, got in all 6, decided to go to Harvard College. And that's where that educational story, at least college educational story, began. That's where I met most of you. 79 is doing 5.
So why Wall Street? Why investment banking? I mean, I'm looking at the fact that you went to study in Europe a bit after college. I know that you're a history major, and it seems like you would have been a very fine law professor or something like that. Why Wall Street and why investment banking?
Michelle, when I got to Harvard College, those freshman year Facebooks, I was going to do one of 2 things. I was going to be pre-med and pre-law. And I was going to be pre-med because of Ben Casey. I was going to be pre-law because of Perry Mason. And I walked into the Science Center and I thought I was going to be early. I get to class and the first 10 rows were packed with people who had those little multicolored pens. And the professor would say something. I had no idea what he was saying. So I decided to major in English and American literature. I did that. In my senior year, junior, senior year, a tutor by the name of Larry Jackson said, Ray, you ought to apply to business school over there because half your grade comes from, kind of talking to people. He said it a little differently. And I said, okay, I applied to one business school. And I applied to law school at the same time and did the joint program. Going into business was not something banking I didn't know anything about. I learned about banking at the Tasty restaurant. At the Tasty restaurant in Harvard Square, because there was a guy who was in my business school section said, I've seen you in section. I think you'd be good at this banking stuff. So I interviewed and got a job and, one of 2 summer associate jobs and started my job. It wasn't a career. I didn't know anything about a career. It was just a job. I started a job in I would say September of 1984. And that's what started my career. I now call it a career, but it was a job. I got a job on Wall Street. I didn't know anything about it.
You kind of make yourself sound like a naif, but that's not the way, the way you've sort of described your entry into it in sort of other conversations. Like I'm thinking about the interview that you gave for History Makers, where you were given sort of 5 minutes to say, why should we hire you? And you said, basically, I will always find a way to win. And you'd rather have me with you than against you. Very Michael Jordan. So I'm just tell me a little bit more about that.
What do you call it, a naif? I don't know what a naif is, but if it's good, that's what I am. So if that's what I had, I love this because I'm learning as I'm going. So what I said, Michelle, and I remember first of all, it was a business school, and I had the initial interview, and they invited me to a cocktail reception at the Ritz-Carlton in downtown Boston. And it was big time. I'd never been to a Ritz and rarely got to downtown Boston, other than the Filings basement, I have to tell you. And so I get to this interview and I pop a beer, small room before I went into a big room. I go into this big room and there are a lot of people from what was then the First Boston Corporation, and they all emptied out except for one person. And he took his chair. It's just he and I in this room, in this large hotel room. And he said, listen, you got 5 minutes, shoot your best shot. I said, what do you want me to say? And he said, I don't know. You got 4 minutes and 45 seconds. And so, I come from the neighborhood, and that felt like to me, he was getting up on my grill. So I didn't know I didn't know what to say, and I had nothing to lose. So then I said, Harvard College, Harvard Law School, and Harvard Business School pride themselves on taking the cream of the crop. I pride myself on being the film off the top of the cream. He said, okay. He said, you got half your business school class interviewing for a 2 summer associate job. There's probably 450 to 500 people interviewing. Why you? I said, well, in the heat of battle, it is better to have me on your side than to have me against you, because I'll find a way to win. I got one of those 2 summer associate jobs.
So why'd you stay in it? What did you like about it? What do you like, or have you liked about it? You're sort of doing something
Well,
else right now. Why'd you stay in it? You said it was a job at first and then it became a career. What did you like about it?
Well, I began to get pretty good at it. And so it was I thought I'd last 2 to 3 years because I didn't think people in the business school represented much of in which I had an interest. So I said, okay, I'm pretty good at it. I'll stay. It's a decent paying job. And it got more competitive and I began to have more successes at it. So I decided to stay. And it was pretty exciting. It was at kind of the frontier. And remember, Michelle, at that time, there was only 1 or 2 Black people in corporate finance across Wall Street. In mergers and acquisitions is not something that anybody from my neighborhood knew anything about, nor did I. And so I got recruited by a guy named Joe Perella and a guy named Bruce Wasserstein. And they were at the frontier of mergers and acquisitions. And I got the opportunity to go to First Boston, and they said, you can go to sales and trading, you go to mergers and acquisitions. I didn't know the difference between a stock and a bond, but I did know that I could read about mergers and acquisitions in the newspaper, so I decided to go there. And that is, that's how I started. And I saw the best people in my business school class going, and I knew something about finance. I knew that finance mattered, but I didn't have any training in any of this. I had no exposure to any of it. And so it was a journey for me. When I call it a walk of faith, my life has been a walk of faith. So I can attribute it to that. But it was a journey for me. I knew nothing.
But what do you like about it?
I like the level of competitiveness, the level of intensity, the fact that people are actually relying on your judgment, and the judgment that you apply, that you render, is they're able to take decisions about their companies, their employees, themselves, and their leadership. And we're advising senior managements and boards. They're actually taking your advice. And that advice leads to an action of creating jobs and making certain that they plan for the future strategically. That's what you like about it, because you develop trust. And based on that trust and based on your experience and ultimately your judgment, people make decisions.
And is there anything you haven't liked about it?
It's a grinding, grueling lifestyle. And, you don't get to choose your clients as a job. So you don't get to kind of identify the kind of politics or any of that you enter into. But it's grueling, and not everything about it is as attractive, but it was the frontier for me. It was a frontier for a lot of people who look like me. Most people look like me. And what I like about it is the ability to have gone and competed at the highest level. It exacts a toll. But
So when did you start thinking about running for mayor? Was it a kind of a eureka moment, Paul on the road to Damascus moment, like a burning bush? Like what happened there?
Burning bush, road to Damascus, maybe Joseph, since we're in the word.
What was that process?
The process was I had been involved in the sponsorship, the support of Democratic politics at the congressional level, at the senatorial level. I knew 44 since before he was a senator, and I introduced the Vice President, Kamala Harris, to New York. So I've been a long-standing supporter of the Democratic Party. And I know this is nonpartisan, but just in terms of my own involvement, a long-standing supporter of the Democratic Party. And I looked at the environment, and I looked at the kind of the circumstances that we found ourselves in. Not only the country, yes, New York City, which I love so deeply, but especially Black and brown people. And if I said, if I can take what they now call my lived experiences, and I can take what I've been able to experience in business, both from a management and a leadership standpoint, helping others, and I can take the relationships that I've been able to develop, I am uniquely positioned to bring the city together and to lead it. I've developed the relationships. I've not only in for-profit, but not-for-profit. And people have demonstrated the fact that they're prepared to follow my leadership, not only with their personal careers, but what takes place with the nonprofit organizations. I've been able to make certain that I've extended the ladder to help others come up behind me. So I said, if I can take all these three things together and lead this city forward, I am uniquely positioned at a dangerous moment in time where we are lacking real leadership, where I have a track record of having performed for people across the spectrum, especially those who look like me. If I could do this on a larger scale, now's the time to do it.
So when I ask if my staff pitches to me, like say tomorrow morning, we're going to have this pitch meeting where they're going to pitch me what they would like. You know, obviously I have my own ideas about what we should be doing, but they want to pitch what they think we should be doing for the weekend. I ask them 3 questions. Why this person on this topic at this time? Why this person on this topic at this time? So I'm going to ask you, how does your skill set match up with the challenge?
We are in the midst of a crisis, a budgetary crisis, an economic crisis, a safety and security and quality of life crisis, and an educational crisis, all of which existed long before COVID and long before George Floyd. And before I left city, I was fortunate to write a foreword to what is now, I think, the definitive study on the implications of 400 years of systemic inequity in education, in healthcare, in the economy, in the criminal justice system, the impact of which we've calculated. Dana Peterson, who is the economist, Black economist who's done the study, calculated that the impact on the US economy has been $16 trillion. And that if we begin to—
You're talking about the COVID crisis? Are you speaking specifically of—
No. Prior to COVID, pre-COVID.
Prior to COVID, prior to COVID. Mhm.
All that COVID has done is to, what I'm saying is that what COVID has done is to reveal the systemic inequities that this study outlines and goes into detail on. And it's the systemic inequities in those categories, which are the categories that make us who we are: economics, healthcare, education, and criminal justice. Pre-COVID, what is the impact of the systemic inequities in those categories? And that's the reference, and that's the foreword that I wrote. And I would encourage this group to take a look at that. And so it is based on that why now? Because we're in the midst of a crisis that I've outlined. It's a crisis of COVID, it's a crisis of the economy, and it's a crisis of racial and religious segregation. All those 3 at the same time. We have the existential crisis of the environment, which we've yet to address. So it's all those crises which would demand leadership. No jobs, no city, no dignity. So we have to get the economy working. There is nobody better positioned with a track record of having built businesses and managed budgets that are larger than most state budgets, who understands what it's like not to have, who can bridge the divides that now exist and bring the city together. I have fluency in the language of the streets and the suites. So why me? Because of that. Why now? Because the moment calls for it. And the moment that I've outlined the crisis that exists. And unless somebody intervenes now, who can command the respect, in whom the people believe, and in whom they trust, because they can, there's a verifiable track record, this city will continue to go backwards, especially for those Black and brown people.
So you use the word trust. I hope it's not a partisan statement. I'm just going to assert this. I think I can speak for a lot of Americans when I say that I don't believe that many people believe that the country has prospered under the leadership of a New York businessman with no experience in government other than fundraising. Or maybe a few people have. A tiny slice of the population of people, very wealthy people with extensive stock holdings, maybe those people have prospered, but very few others, of which you are one. So why should people trust you at a time like this with no experience in government? Everybody knows that New York City is this very Byzantine, complicated system of governance, not to mention this very complicated relationship with Albany. So why should people trust you to do this task with no experience in government, other than, of course, your extensive philanthropy, which I'm sure everybody appreciates?
So I would just look at the track record of those who have had experience in government and where we are, where we've gone backwards, especially Black and brown people. That's one. So I wouldn't stipulate that somebody who's got an experience in government is actually going to be the kind of person who we need. Remember, I didn't get termed out. I'm not looking for a promotion. I quit my job. So let me respond to that other than philanthropy. If you look at the number of Black and brown people in corporate America, in Wall Street, in whose lives I have been involved, from those people who are in programs like SEO or CUP or MLT, look at the track record of those whose lives I've been fortunate to have an impact on. And that is not an insignificant number. And oh, by the way, when I came to Harvard College, my friends and I had $1 between us. So those people who have that lived experience There's nobody else who's had the kind of lived experience. There's nobody else who grew up how I grew up. I didn't grow up in a blue blood environment. So I have had the experience of knowing what it's like not to have. I've also had the experience of knowing those who haven't had and making sure that they have the same opportunities that I have across the spectrum for the last 20 to 30 years. So if there's any moment in time when somebody with my experience, my track record, and my skill set is needed, it's now. You want me on that wall today. Because otherwise—
And what about, and it's been reported, I believe accurately, that you didn't vote in either the general or the primary in 2017, 2013, 2009, and in 2005. Why not?
like all New Yorkers, I should have voted, but you know, the demands of the job and the demands of travel probably kept me out of that. So I own that. But going forward, voting is critical. There are people who died for the right to vote, and I should have voted, but you know, the circumstances at the time probably kept me away from the polls.
You can't vote absentee. They don't have that there.
They may
You could
have.
have voted absentee. I mean, don't they have absentee voting in New York?
They may have. I just missed the opportunity.
But I mean, how do you explain to people who are like, I'm just being honest with you, right? You know, my dad was a firefighter. My mother worked in Bloomingdale's. They never missed an election, ever. And I just feel like if they weren't too busy raising 3 kids, why are you too busy to vote?
I didn't say I was too busy. I just said I missed the election.
Mm-hmm.
It's something that I own. So it won't happen again. I own it.
So who do you rely on for advice? You know, your context becomes you've said many times that investment banking is a relationship business. Who are your relationships? Who do you advise? Who do you rely on for advice? Who would be your kind of personal board of advisors should you take on this job?
You know, I have relied on, because I have so many different relationships, I relied on the people in the neighborhood, relied on the people in the boroughs. I relied on relationships in city government, some who are currently in city government, many who have been in city government. I rely on people at the state level, some who are currently in the state level, some who have been in the state level, and people at the federal level. So
Like who? Like give me an example. Like who would be like your go-to? I know that Valerie Jarrett is one of your co-chairs of your campaign, or I don't know if she's sort of an honorary, but she doesn't live in New York. She lives down here. So who would you be talking to?
Michelle, I talk to lots of people. You should expect I'm talking to people in the neighborhoods. I'm talking to people in the faith-based community. Last night, I was in Brooklyn on President Street talking to a leader in the Jewish community and a leader in the African-American community, faith-based leaders. So I am talking across the board to activists. Those are the people who inform me. And rather than going through a list of people, you should expect that, given the relationships that I've been able to develop across the spectrum of voters, from those people who are long-standing activists, those people who got us here, you should expect that I'm talking to Vernon Jordan. You should expect that I have talked to Franklin Thomas. You should expect that I've talked to Dick Parsons. You should expect that I've talked to Al Sharpton. You should expect that I've talked to all the leaders on whose shoulders I stand, all of them. And I continue.
Women? Can you name some women who you've talked to?
You should expect that I've talked to Ursula Burns. You should expect that I've talked to, Melba Wilson. You should expect that I've talked to a whole cast of people, My views here have been informed by, people who have lived this, people who are continuing to live this. You should expect that I talk to Dakota Keys. Dakota Keys runs PS 272, which is a school that started with a F grade and she's moved it to an A grade. And, she is a principal of a public school and she's done extraordinarily well. So you should expect that across the spectrum of people who can give me input about what's taking place today, you should expect that I've talked to them.
What's your relationship with the governor?
I have known the governor for a while. So I would say that it's a relationship of respect.
Why do you think his relationship with the current mayor is so toxic? What's your take on that?
I don't really have a take, but I can tell you, in a world that is divisive as this is, that there's no tolerance for that. There's not a point in time in the history of this city where New York City has thrived without having a good relationship between the mayor and the governor. So I would expect, underscoring that my sole purpose is for what's in the best interest of New York City, I would expect that relationship has got to be a constructive relationship in order for us to survive these crises. So
And what's your take on how he's handled the COVID crisis so far? I'm speaking specifically of the governor here, because as you know, and folks who are joining us who are outside of the New York area may be aware that, you know, in the early stages of the pandemic, the governor was very much appreciated for what was seen as his candor and forthrightness and taking it seriously at a time when national leadership was not. But subsequently, there's been a lot of disappointment and some anger about his specifically how he handled a specific problem, which was the issue of folks in congregate care facilities and nursing homes. So Ray, what's your take on that? How has he handled the COVID crisis overall? And what would you do differently now going forward, since we're still going to be in this, don't you agree? We're still going to be in some kind of a crisis going forward, right?
Yeah, the answer is, I think he has, I think he's actually overall done quite a commendable job. I think it's been effective. I look across the leadership in the country, at least past administration, to what he's been able to manage through. I think it's been quite effective with respect to what's taking place with the elderly. I think the jury's still out. I don't have a view on that yet as it evolves. So overall, I would say he has been as effective as any in managing us through this crisis with a consistent and candid and transparent response, at least to the points that we've known, differently to how others have been inconsistent.
One more question about this is because it's been reported that he basically was bullying or trying to bully this councilman, Ron Kim, who he says called him up while he was giving his kids a bath and was screaming so loud at him that his kids got upset. And so, you know, this matter is now being investigated. I mean, I'm just wondering, you know, here's how other people are interpreting this. They're interpreting this as perhaps that the governor has some of the kinds of authoritarian tendencies that have been so decried in the sort of the previous national leadership. Do you think that that's true?
You know, I don't have a view on that. I'm not close enough to involve. And one of the things that you know when you compete is that there are lots of people who have a whole bunch of opinions without having all the facts. I don't have all the facts. So it's irresponsible for me to exercise any kind of view on this, which gets down to how you kind of manage the exercise of your judgment. You got to have all the facts. And so
let's go. I'm sorry. So I just want to go to the questions that a lot of that your classmates have been sending in, because some of them speak specifically to pandemic related issues, and some speak more broadly to some of the other broader issues, systemic issues that you brought up sort of previously. So I just want to start with the pandemic. How will you help New York City recover as we come out of the pandemic? As you know, some of your competitors have some very specific plans, very interesting plans that involving like a borough-wide party, like a party in every borough. I mean, that's not the only thing, but what are some of your specific plans to help New York recover?
So let's be clear about the recovery here and what's included. We are managing through a budget deficit. We went from an $80 billion to a $92 billion run rate in expenses. We now have projected that not this year, but in the ensuing years, we're going to have a $4 plus $4 billion deficit. And so while we can clearly be more efficient, given what I've outlined in terms of the increase in the spend of $12 billion, we can neither cut nor tax our way out of this. So we have to grow our way out of this. And what I've outlined specifically is 500,000 jobs in my plan, what I call the McGuire comeback, which is the greatest, most inclusive economic comeback in the history of this city, which is focused on go big, go small, go forward. Go big is 500,000 jobs focused on infrastructure. Infrastructure includes climate resiliency. It includes fractured bridges and sewage mains. It includes busted elevator banks and elevators in subways. And it includes creating deeply affordable housing and workforce housing in ways that we haven't been able to manage that up to this point. It also includes making sure that we have the infrastructure, the technology infrastructure, which today, because you got 1.5 million New Yorkers without access to mobile or broadband that we need to address immediately because of digital divide. That's part of the Go Big plan. Go Small is making sure that we focus on the small businesses, and in particular, because small businesses represent 50% of the employee base in the city. In particular, I want to make certain that we do what I call the Jobs Accelerator, and the Jobs Accelerator is 50,000 small businesses. We take 50% of their wages for a year. We saw this after 9/11. We saw this at the depths of the financial crisis. So we're going to take care of 50% of the wages for a year. We will also make certain that they can keep their sales tax receipts for a year. We will intercede when it comes to their credit scores and make certain that they get relief on the credit scores and get a holiday for their credit scores so that after February of 2020, they don't get penalized, unduly penalized for the impact of COVID. We're also going to create, in many of the plans, that some of the things you're talking about, I started discussing this summer, a comeback bank. What's a comeback bank going to do? It's going to be capitalized so that I can give the following two, and at one point it's going to be three, but the following two sources of capital to the banks, to the small businesses, going to be grants and equity. At one point, I thought low interest loans maybe for those new businesses, but for the existing businesses, we have to address that. I will create a deputy mayor for small businesses. And then so that's small businesses. And I will also give them relief on many of the fines that have been levied. I got for restaurants, 45 fines from 7 different agencies. That's not business friendly. So I'll be pro growth. And then going forward, I'm going to focus on a comeback bank, which I've outlined. And that's going to make sure I'm going to focus on the minority and women-owned business enterprises. I'm going to invite technology to be a partner here. So this becomes the epicenter for technology.
What does that mean? You're going to invite technology here. Does that mean what? Offering tax incentives for people to, what does that mean?
Yeah, that does mean that. That means I'm going to work with what now are some of the leading technology companies, small companies where we've made some significant investments and watch them grow. So technology, and I'll focus on what's taking place at CUNY and other places. We have Cornell Tech, we have NYC Tech. So we have 3 or 4 or 5 different initiatives out there already that are focused on technology. Technology includes biotech, it includes basic tech, it includes making certain we have the right software engineers, includes telemedicine, but we have to invest in technology, so I invest in the city of the future.
So what about Amazon? Some people consider Amazon to be primarily a technology company. I don't know if you do. What about that? I mean, obviously that particular train has left the station of Amazon's second headquarters being located in New York for a lot of opposition. And I just wondered, do you think that that was a mistake to discourage Amazon's being there? And what do you make of that now?
Pure abject mistake. Yes, absolutely.
Speak on more, say more.
Because, if I look at the people in the community who were not at the table from the outset, the challenge you have with Amazon is that the community wasn't involved from the outset, which has happened to many of these large projects. So you got to get the community involved, and the community has to be at the table in the early days, which is not what occurred here. And therefore the narrative was hijacked. That won't happen on my watch. So the implications of Amazon, the jobs that they would have created, the infrastructure that they would have built, the schools that they would have built. You do a survey of the community today, and you get 70+% of the people in the community who welcome Amazon being there. It just was not managed appropriately, wasn't negotiated right, and the people who have the most, whose lives are going to be the most impacted, were not at the table.
Well, some of the people who were most vociferous about it, and it was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who's obviously a rising star of the progressive movement. And, I don't know that at the end of the day, her take on it was they shouldn't come, but her feeling was that the deal was lopsided. It was going to jack up housing prices in the area, and that she didn't feel the people you're talking about were going to get a benefit from it. So I'd just like to ask, do you have a relationship with her? And if you could have that conversation with her, what would you say?
I don't have a relationship with her. I will welcome a relationship with her. I think she's got a voice. That's an important voice. But I also look in the community, the people who are going to be the most impacted, the ones who are going to be displaced. And I talk to those people. I was out talking to them. I'm walking the streets there, and I'm talking to the people about these specific issues. And what they're telling me is they would have welcomed that. They wanted to be involved, but they would have welcomed the investment. They would have welcomed the jobs. They would welcome the opportunity so that they could have a wage that allowed them to get from lower class to be middle class homeowners.
So what was the disconnect there? So what was the disconnect? Is it your view that the people negotiating that deal didn't know how to do it, and that they didn't know how? I mean, you're saying that there seems to be like a gap between what the community really wanted and what the leadership was able to sell.
There is exactly.
Is that it?
Yeah, that gap occurred. Yes, there's a huge gap, and that gap remains. The gap remains. So I get some of the narrative, but the facts are the gap remains, and the people in the community were not at the table. You have a group of leaders, a small group of leaders who made a decision on behalf of the entirety of the group, of the population. And again, you look at all the statistics afterwards, you look at the survey of the community, And what they will see as you do your own research and your people do the research, you will see that those people welcomed Amazon. I have people there, some of our classmates who live there, who are still economically challenged, who say to me, Ray, we should have had it. Because I have an
So,
constructed view of the East River, and Amazon was going to obstruct that view, but look at what they're going to bring to the community, and I stand up for that. So if it had been done correctly, I'd be in support of it.
this may or may not be a related issue, but New York's this is a question again from classmates who sent this in. The question is that New York City's population has been declining since 2016. And I think that trend has only been accelerated during COVID. I mean, I don't know what the number is as of this moment, but I'm sure that over 100,000 people have left during COVID. I don't know whether they consider themselves temporary exiles or what their sort of situation is. So the question is, do you work to reverse that trend? And if so, how?
The answer is yes, unequivocally. We work to reverse that trend. The people who are left don't have confidence in the leadership. They don't have confidence in the leadership being able to move this city forward. The city is broke, it's broken, and it's divided. And what the people want now is something different. They don't want press releases. They don't want promises that have gone unfilled, because they see the city and many of its citizens, especially those who are the most underserved, are moving backwards. So all of what has been advertised, those advertisements has not been fulfilled. And when the people get some evidence that leadership cares and is inclusive and has an agenda, has a plan, has a vision, has the ability to execute on it, the people will return. Those people who have left will return. And those people who still want to come to the greatest city that exists with the biggest opportunities, including some of the biggest challenges, they will come here.
And one of the big challenges, of course, is housing. I mean, this affects everything. Affordable housing affects everything. It affects your teachers, it affects your civil servants, it affects everything. And so that is one of the questions from your classmates is, what about that?
Well,
how do you maintain sort of affordable? Let me just see if I can find the question specifically so I can accurately. Well, there are a lot of questions about housing, but that's the gist of it, is how do you create kind of a viable, affordable housing strategy?
So let's be clear about how this city has been built. So when we were building appropriately, we built 2.2 units of housing for every new job. Today, we build 0.5 units of housing for every new job. The demand has so outpaced the supply that the city's gotten too expensive. And if you review my economic comeback plan, fundamental to that plan is the building of truly affordable housing. As those people who build will call it, it is deeply affordable housing. It is housing that translates not into people having to pay 50 to 60% of their income in rent. It is deeply affordable housing that exists at, I would say, below 50% of the metric, which is the area median income. So,
and where does it go? Where is it? Where does the housing, if you're building, you talk about new construction, where does it go?
Well, we have enough sites here to be able to put the new housing up. In 5 boroughs, we have needs in each of these boroughs for new housings. So we'll have to rezone, we'll have to build, get the right people to help design. One of the Zoom calls I had today were people who did just that, urban design. They've done an extraordinary job. So we have to commit to it. The commitments that were made in some of the prior administrations have gone unfulfilled. And so what my plan includes is just that, it's building. And if you look at what is taking place in the city when it comes to construction at some point was $60+ billion. That's come down now. And the projection is going to come down 15+%. We need to build, and we need to build truly affordable housing, deeply affordable housing, and we need to build workforce housing so that you can get above 50% of the area median income for those people who want to transition into home ownership in the middle class. And if we make programs available for first-time buyers, you begin to attract people, and those people have aspirations of home ownership, especially in Black and brown communities. You make that available to them. That is part of the pillar of my comeback plan.
You know, today is the anniversary of the day that Ahmaud Arbery was murdered. And obviously that was a vigilante killing. I mean, these were not people acting under color of law, but they were certainly acting under color of privilege. It raises the question of the relationship between communities and policing. In the spirit of full disclosure, I think people, you know, people may or may not know this. I come from a policing family. I had 6 police officers in my family at one point. That first generation has all passed on. And the second generation, my cousins, are retired and doing, how can I say, they're doing private security for people you would know who they are. But
You mean part of my kitchen cabinet?
part of your kitchen cabinet. So my question is, no, my point is that, you know, this is one of the most important questions confronting the country, is what policing should look like, how it should change or not change. And then there's, oh, by the way, there's also the question of sort of the dissonance between who's actually on the force and who's leading the conversations on their behalf, okay? So let's sort of take those separately. First of all, just what's your assessment of the relationship now between police and the citizens of New York? And what would you do to move it wherever you think it should go?
So the answer is, and I just came out with my safety and justice plan last week. And by the way, it would be remiss if I didn't tell you that one of the people whose advices I've sought and who has recently endorsed me is Mother Gwen Carr. You mentioned Ahmaud Arbery. Let's not forget about Eric Garner and his mother, who has surveyed the universe of candidates, has come out to say that she thinks I'm the best person to represent the city going forward. So let me say that, and I'm honored for that to be the case, and deeply grateful for that. I have come out with a safety and justice plan, which has as its core a reallocation, a restructuring of the NYPD. And what it includes is, at its core, the culture of respect, accountability, and proportionality. Right?
Okay, tell me, yeah, people have been saying that for like, what, how long, 20 years? Tell me, what does it look like? How does that translate from the academy to what happens on the street?
Yeah, I'm not certain who's been saying what, but let me tell you what it means for me. You asked the question of how do I define the relationship? It's been broken. The trust is not there. So one, in order to establish that trust, we need to have accountability. We pay $200 million a year for those people who are the serial abusers who've cast a cloud over the entire agency. So we need to address that. And let me talk about proportionality, because that's part of it. Proportionality means that what has been said by many, that if the only thing you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When it comes to Black and brown communities, it's a sledgehammer. So what is my plan? My plan is to appoint a deputy mayor for public safety who has the responsibility to interact daily with the NYPD. It comes down to making certain that, in addition to that, I want to make certain that the chain of command is held accountable. Chain of command, not just the person who is the abuser, but the chain of command is held accountable. I want to also make certain that we empower the CCRB with investigative authority. It takes today 48 days for them to review video camera footage. I'll make it 48 hours. I also will create an Office of Emergency Social Services so that those people who are mentally challenged, we can deploy. Those people have the professional skill set to intervene. I want them to co-locate in the precinct so that they can be deployed at the same time, if not before, the NYPD. So those are specific, tangible ways that I intend to go about doing this.
Is that defund? Is that your version of defund the police? Is that your defund the police?
You know, I don't like the language. I don't agree with the language. I will restructure and reallocate, and I also return to community policing. So that's a fundamental part. So return to community policing, the investment in the community-based organizations of violence interrupters, and the other thing that is my plan is to attack the iron pipeline, I-95 pipeline. We've seen gun shootings go up almost 100% and murders going up 45 to 50%. We need to address that. And that iron pipeline that exists from the communities that manufacture the guns to the 10 precincts or so that have the highest incidents of gun violence. We need to address that. So it's a comprehensive approach to how we begin to restore the trust between the community and the police, which now has been breached. And unless there's accountability, which ultimately I will have, unless there's accountability, we're not going to restore the trust. Unless there's community policing, we're not going to restore the trust. Unless we invest in the community organizations that can give us the resources on the mental health side, we're not going to restore the trust. Unless we can invest in the violence interrupters in the communities, we're not going to restore the trust. So my plan is to address all those items. And I talk to the people in the community. both the victims of it, the formerly incarcerated, the police, the precinct captains. I've talked to all of them. So my plan is informed heavily by what I will call the kitchen cabinet. Don't need to have the names, but just think about
The union, the police union. I mean, New York City has the largest police force in the United States, and it's very fascinating to know that the demographics of the department, let me just put it this way, are not reflected in the union leadership, which generally represents them sort of in an outward facing situations, as we know that the chairman spoke at one of the political conventions, for example, last summer.
Mhm.
I just wonder, like, how do you navigate that relationship?
So what you're referencing here, I think the facts will show, your analysis will show that the demographics of the force are 50+% Black and brown officers. The leadership is a different demographic. We need to make certain that we elevate those people who reflect the community demographics into leadership positions. And so I would make certain that as I reviewed candidates, that I had and I would do this across the country to make certain that I had the right leadership, and that right leadership will reflect the values that I have and the culture that I've outlined. And
But
so,
that is nothing, you have no control over the union.
pardon?
You have no control over the union.
Well, you'll have to have a conversation with the union to explain to the union what's important. There are ways to manage around that. And people have yet to be able to do that. But people they should recognize that there's a way forward in how you negotiate. It can't all be one way. You have to be able to put people at the table and but first of all, you got to get them to the table, and leadership has got to not shy away from that, which I will not do. I've never shied away from from meeting any challenge, which is the track record that I'm referencing. Just check the record.
What about legalization of marijuana? I think that's a state issue, but what's your take on it?
My take is I want to make certain that those who are incarcerated and the formerly incarcerated who've been incarcerated because of incidents around marijuana, those slates get clean, wiped clean. I'd have them exit so they become formally incarcerated. I would make certain that to the extent there was investment in marijuana, they were some of the ones who could actually invest and benefit from it. So legalization, yes, that comes with conditions precedent of making certain those people whose lives have been impacted negatively by marijuana are the ones who benefited not only with the cleaning of the record, but making certain we have the appropriate transition for them out of incarceration back into society so they can be productive citizens.
So we have down for our last couple of minutes, and as I said, I wanted to give you time to give a closing thought. So I did want to just ask a couple of sort of political questions. As I said, as Dorian made very clear, this is not an endorsing experience. This is not a fundraiser, etc. But I did want to spend a little bit on the politics because, politics is the means by which government happens. So the question is, with such a large candidate field, what's your strategy for competing and making the runoff? And what's your take on why turnout in the New York City primaries is so low?
There won't be a runoff. There is just, it's ranked choice voting, which I think given the number of people here and given the message that is getting out, my message getting out and resonating to the people, that we should be pretty well positioned, and people want something different. This is not politics as usual. What has happened up to this point will not work. It has not worked. It ain't gonna work, especially for those people who are Black and brown who've gone backwards. People are telling me they want something different. They want something new. Remember, I didn't get termed out. I'm not looking for a promotion. This is something I'm doing out of my love for this city. And so the question is how do we move forward? And who's the right leader to move us forward?
Some people would like to see a woman in that job. What would you say to people who say, one of the things that's always been the case is that New York City has always had men doing that job. And some people think, what would really be different is a woman. What would you say to them?
Listen, I think what would be different is the best candidate. I think getting into the politics of race and gender, let's get the best candidate. Let the voting population, let the electorate choose whom they think the best candidate is to lead this city forward. And we should all be open to all possibilities. And given the number of people who are in this race, the voters will have a choice. And the message will get out, and the message will either resonate or they won't. But people will have a choice, and clear choices. It's the same old. I ain't been in nobody's administration. It's the same old or something different. The same old has gotten us into this mess today. And so,
Bloomberg was a business guy too, with businessman with he. I mean, they've had business executives who've run New York before.
Well, but you asked me what's different and how the voters are
Mhm.
going to react. So
Mhm.
I continue to react to this reference to Bloomberg. I ain't Mike Bloomberg. I wake up black every day. I know what it's like not to have. And at some point, we need to celebrate people who look like us, who've had successes, who are not athletes or entertainers.
Mm.
I
Well,
don't,
David Dinkins was black every day too. I mean,
you know, I don't live by the sound bites that people attempt to attribute. That's
Mhm.
not who I am. So I react to that, and I react to that because I come up I come up in the streets, I come up in the neighborhood, and yes, I've been able to achieve a position in this world that needs to be celebrated. You want me on that wall right now.
Mhm.
That's something
So
that gets caught in the-
what's this been like? What's this whole experience been like? Is it analogous to anything you've done before? Like, what's been the thing about this whole experience of running that has sort of, I don't know, surprised you, delighted you, just sort of, what tell me about it.
I guess it's the experience of how you as a, as a 6'4", 200-pound black man survive in the competitive world, the competitive corporate world. It's just a little different playing field, but it's not dissimilar, except for the stakes are not dissimilar. And to be able to have done that for 36 years, the longest standing head of banking in the history of Wall Street as a black person, that should reflect some distinction that doesn't get caught in a soundbite because I've worked in business for all those years and been able to help so many different people extended the ladder to
Is it fun? Is
Pardon?
it fun? Is it fun?
It is great to get out and
Like, what's fun? Like, tell people, like, everybody hasn't worked on a campaign or been part of, like, what's fun about it? Just describe it.
What's fun about it is interacting with so many people, so many brilliant people, so many culturally rich people, so many different organizations, so many leaders, all of whom have great opinions. Well, all of whom have opinions, some great, some not, all of them have great ideas. And interacting, getting that kind of input has been really inspiring. And to see the promise that we have as people with the right leadership, and also to experience the crisis that many of our people who don't have a voice are currently having and who will not have a voice if we do the same thing. So what's exciting is about the promise,
Mhm.
promise of the future with the right leadership. That's what's really exciting about this. I get so excited about that. Every time I meet one of these young people and one of these young entrepreneurs and some of the students in SEO or the HBCUs or at CUP, I get so excited about the future with the right leadership and the right opportunity. That's what's so great about this, because you can make a difference and people want something different. And so it's resonating. I got so many young people out there who volunteered, who want to be part of this because they see all the stuff in the past, all the promises have gone unfulfilled. And look at what I've been able to accomplish humbly, coming from where I've come from, to at least advance and advise and give them some hope and some example of what the possibilities are going forward. That's what I get excited about, the future. I get excited about the future of the people who look like me, especially all New Yorkers, but especially those people who look like me.
Do you ever think about the impact on your family? I mean, one of the things that that gives a lot of people pause these days in politics is the sort of the collateral damage. I mean, one of the things that didn't exist before, like 10 years ago, was the sort of social media swarm that can be really ugly. I just would have wondered, have you thought about the impact on your family and how you're going to manage that?
Yeah, my wife is extraordinary. My wife is a ex-lawyer who is a documentary film producer. She's done most of the documentaries for Legal Defense Fund. She has written 3 books. She has made feature films. My wife is a truly fierce, extraordinary, brilliant warrior. And she's with me every step of the way. Our 8-year-old, Leo, is every step of the way. Ella's every step of the way. And Cole, who has been drafted first round into the NBA, starting point guard for the Orlando Magic, all in. We're all in. My 95-year-old mother prays for me every day. She turned 95 on Valentine's Day. I'm sorry, last Sunday, a week after Valentine's Day. My 95-year-old mother-in-law, who's here with us from Detroit, is all in. So our family is all in because we recognize that there's an opportunity to make a difference in the lives of so many people in the way that people have made a difference in our lives. The word says, to whom much is given, much is required. And so we follow that. This has been a walk of faith. It has been faith. It's been prayer, preparation, performance. And when you grow up in the neighborhood, a little bit of paranoia that's gotten me here.
Okay.
So we're all excited about this, Michelle. So thank you.
Before we let you go, so it's 7, we said we would give you, well, I don't know, how much time you need, 5 minutes to kind of give us your valedictory. It could be your benediction. I don't know what you want to call it. And then,
I think when we think about the possibility of the future, it ought to be, I don't know, valedictory as we set ourselves off into the hope of tomorrow. If I take my lived experiences and I take all the things that we've talked about, on October the 15th, I called my then 94-year-old mother and said, Mom, I quit my job. She said, boy, you have lost your mind. What happened? I thought you had a good job. And yes, Mama, I have had a good job. And given the sacrifices that you've made, I've been able to do lots of things and see lots of places. And I've also, based on your example and my grandfather's example, who was the head deacon and state Sunday school superintendent, my grandmother, who was a missionary, I look at their lives of service, of having done the extra to make certain, which is just part of how they've been called, to make certain that the least of thee were taken care of. And we were the least of thee. I know what that's like. So if I can take what they mama call my foundation, which they're calling my lived experiences, and take the blessings and the fortunes I've had to go compete in business in one of the most competitive fields that exists anywhere, and made certain that while I was competing and performing, that I extended the ladder to make certain that I was able to create jobs and to create wealth across the spectrum of this city and this country, especially for those young Black and brown men and women who look at the example of success and say, this is something to which we can aspire. If I take all of that and the relationships and all the things that we've been able to experience, both professional life, civic life, and those examples, and the blessing that I've been given with a family, if we take all that together and understand the language of the streets and the suites, if there's ever a moment in time when we can bring all this together and change the course of history in this city, now is that moment. And that's why I've decided to run for mayor. You know a little bit about me. You know a little bit about my plan and my vision for the city going forward, which is the economy, safety, quality, and quality of life, and justice and education. And it's for those 3 pillars that I have put myself forward, stepping up to make a difference in the ways that people have made a difference in my life. So that's what this is about. I recognize that this is a nonpartisan gathering, but I look across this screen and what you've told me, the people you've told me are here, many of whom grew up with me, or I grew up with them, and we've supported each other through friendship since freshman year. So I'm excited to have had the opportunity to spend some time with you, and I'd be equally as excited if I could get your support. rayformayor.com, and those who are on social media at @rayformayor. And I encourage you to support me on this journey for the future, for the survival and future of this great city. I have a vision. I have a history of having executed both leadership and management, attracting the best talent, managing budget, negotiating transactions, and also recruiting and retaining the best talent, which is what's going to be necessary to lead the city forward. So thank you for inviting me here. You got a lot of people here who decided to participate, and I'm excited about that. And I'm encouraged about the future with the right leadership, something different. And that's something different, who's not a politician, who has a vision, is Ray McGuire. Class of '79 is doing just fine. So thank you.
So before we let you go, Dorian, I am, look, I am 1 hour oriented because my shows are all an hour. They start on time, they end on time, but I'm told that we could go till 7:15. So, which is how they set this up, which is weird. But I mean, I don't understand. I don't understand 7:15. I understand 6 to 7. That's what I understand. So what do you want to do, Dorian? How do you want to fill the time?
Thank you, Michelle. We like being innovative. So,
okay.
and in many cases, you get right to that 60-minute mark and you go, wait. So
okay.
we knew that we had 2 stars here. So we wanted to add a little extra time. Down here in New Orleans, they call it lagniappe. Up in New York, we call it the cherry on top of the ice cream. And so there are a lot of questions in the Q&A.
Sure. So do you want to do some more of those?
If you can guide us through some of these questions in the Q&A.
Sure, let's do it. All right, let's just do a
about
couple
10
more.
minutes.
Ray, how you feel? You want to do a couple
more? I'm good. Let's keep going.
All right, let's do it. So
All right.
lightning round. How are you going to finance your go big, go small, and third aspect?
So let's go through the numbers. The balance of trade between New York and federal government, $26 billion to the benefit of the federal government. Under the plan that the Biden administration has outlined, there are three aspects of it. Infrastructure is been highlighted as a huge component of that. Today, New York is rumored to have been allocated out of the CARES Act and the return $5.6 billion. The state has been allocated roughly, rumor has it, $12+ billion. So I'll take the $5.6 billion. So first of all, federal government infrastructure focus will benefit from some of that. State allocation will benefit from some of that. We have money coming to the city, will benefit from some of that. We have money that capital, and I can go into the capital budget, recognizing the constraints that are in the formula for how you can access the capital budget and the impact on the operating budget. I know what that is, so I know the capacity that we have to help fund the infrastructure projects that I've outlined, and we can also access the markets. So we have capacity in the capital budget, and to the extent that we need some relief in the capital budget, I am uniquely positioned to go talk to the rating agencies about the implications to have on our credit rating. So we know how to do that. I have plans and obviously have gone through the scenarios and the modeling of how we're going to pay for it. So we know how we're going to pay for this go big and go small. The 50,000 businesses with 50% of the receipts, that's going to cost us $975 million or so. We know that there was relief like this given after 9/11, and we also know there was relief like this given in the depths of the 2008 financial crisis. So we have access to federal dollars, we have access to state dollars, we also have access to city dollars. So there's a plan in place to pay for this. And I've just given you some of the outlines of which, and furthermore, when it comes to some of these infrastructure projects, there's enormous amounts of capital in the private capital in the infrastructure space, which we can access because we understand where the capital is. We understand the returns that they're looking for. So they, if they would get, and I'm being quite conservative here, 15 to 20% on their investment, maybe I give them 10 to 20, 10 to 15, 10% on a risk adjusted basis, it's a good investment. So public-private partnerships are going to be really important. And the other thing that I didn't talk about, which is going to be part of my comeback plan, is summer jobs. We didn't talk about this when it comes to education, but summer jobs, and every child in New York City should have a summer job. And what the government can't pay for, we'll enlist the private sector to pay for and support us. So every child in New York City having a summer job. I had a summer job, and it kept me out of trouble and helped me get a little dollars in my pocket. And I want to make certain that every child in New York City who wants a summer job has a paid summer job.
Tech companies are known to be some of the least diverse companies other than minimum wage jobs. How will you ensure, I'm reading a question from the audience, how will you ensure that minimum wage workers are treated equitably at tech companies and in other sectors?
It has got to be a priority in my go forward strategy of my economic plan. I have specific designations for MWBEs, including what takes place in technology, appointing a deputy mayor. So I want to prioritize this that has range across each of the agencies so that we focus just on this. And I will set goals to make sure that we achieve this. And to the extent they want to participate in any of the city allocations, they're going to have to meet those goals.
This is a sort of a broader question about just the whole question of, this is not a specific to New York question, but is a specific to the sort of taxation overall and the way our economy overall has been structured. I mean, everybody remembers Occupy Wall Street. I'm sure you remember it from however many years ago, remember? And, and one of the issues, maybe people's methods were a little raggedy and it didn't make a lot of sense, but really obviously spoke to a sense that this economy is unbalanced, that this economy favors capital to the expense of the worker in a manner that is just simply untenable going forward. So I guess I'm just asking you, this isn't a specific New York City mayor sort of problem, but I just want to ask you how you think about that. I mean, obviously you've got the skill set to prosper on that side of the ledger. But as you've noticed through the presidential campaign, and one of the former presidential candidates is one of your competitors in this, do you have a theory of everything about like how the way this economy is structured, the fact that people have not experienced a real increase in real wages over 15 years, if you're in certain sectors, how is that addressed overall? Like one of your competitors has the concept of the universal basic income, which is interesting that that's considered such a liberal thing because that was something that, conservatives were touting, 20 years ago, as you recall, right? with, that was one of Charles Murray's ideas. You remember him?
Sure.
And so, yeah, you remember that. I mean, remember he talked about it when we were in school is when he was first sort of advancing this idea on the conservative side, and now it's become sort of seen as this crazy liberal idea. But do you have like a theory of everything about how the economy needs to be structured so that it actually does work for everybody?
Sure, I've written about this, Michelle, and I talked about the forward. That was the definitive study on the implications of 400 years of systemic inequities. It identifies the areas where that systemic inequity has occurred, and it comes up with some remedies. My plan is based on beginning to address those inequities. And that to which you are referencing, I would also query whether or not that person's ever voted in New York City. So let's make sure that the standards we're applying are equal standards across the candidates.
Well, when he comes to visit us, we'll ask him. How about that?
And oh, by the way, this UBI, I look at that as that's giving somebody a fish. I want to teach people how to fish. I don't want a 16-ounce supersized caffeinated drink that's a sugar rush that translates into $5.78 a day. I need to give people wages so they can feel good about themselves, so they can put food on the table, so they can have dignity, so they can afford an apartment and eventually own an apartment. That's what my plan is about.
I understand what you're saying, but I think the whole question here is that this economy is one that favors people who earn their money while they're asleep and disadvantages the people who earn their money while they're awake. And I understand that that's an issue that goes far beyond sort of the mayoralty of New York, but I just want to say your philosophy, your thoughts about that fact, right? I mean, I think a lot of reasonable people would argue that along with kind of a deep-seated racial paranoia, that's in part what has motivated the bile in our sort of political processes over the last however many years, right? Fair? So tell me about that. Like, what's your take on how that gets addressed?
It has to some extent, but I think Black and brown people are looking for an opportunity. They're not looking for a handout. They want a hand up. They want opportunity. What did the great James Brown say? I don't want nobody to give me nothing. Just open up the door and I'll get it myself. We need to be about opening the door. So the theory of the case is, yes, there's been systemic inequities. We've documented those systemic inequities. But we need to also document and have a plan for how we address them. We just can't talk about it. We got to be about it. And everybody's talking about it, but we're not being about it. I got a track record of having addressed it. And we'll continue to do that, both professionally and privately and institutionally.
Okay, but now I'm not talking about opportunities to do what, right? I mean, I'm saying that if the economy is such, look, the technological changes that are depriving people of real wages is real. That is real. I mean, nobody's made that up. Nobody, that's a fact. The fact that certain jobs that actually human beings used to do, like I'm just thinking about, look, back when we used to go to the airport, when you go to the airport, right? There used to be 5 people there taking your tickets. Now there's 1 person there taking your ticket and the machine's taking your ticket and that 1 person is there in case you screw it up. Okay, that's real. So then the question becomes, what now? That is the question. It's not even a black or brown question.
No, let me address that because my plan addresses just that. We are living, which is why infrastructure includes broadband and access to mobile. What we saw is the amplification of the digital divide, especially in our educational system. I got 1.5 million New Yorkers without access to broadband or mobile. I have kids who, when we went from out of classroom or in classroom to out of classroom, we missed for a year. And so part of my plan is to have a bridge from those people who have basic education to retrain them so they can get a high wage job so they can participate going forward. An example is one that I cited, is there's a group that has taken people making $15,000 a year, had them apply, they get pulled offline for 6 to 9 months, get trained as software engineers and re-enter at $85,000 to $95,000 a year. We need to scale programs like that. Yes, we need to make certain that the jobs of today are jobs that we can get to and allocate, make certain that people who are the most needy get those jobs, but we also need to train for the jobs of the future, which we're not doing, which my plan has specific designation to do. Jobs of the future, making certain that we invest in technology, make certain that we bridge this digital divide, make certain that I invest in broadband, make certain that people have digital literacy, both the seniors and those people who are coming up who are in the middle stages, make certain of just that, because the world is transition. We don't have when it comes to the world of the future, when it comes to cars and automobiles, we don't have enough charging stations. So we need to do things as basic as that, to make certain that we plan for the economy and the world of the future. And we do need to do things as basic as getting people broadband so that we begin to deal with this digital divide and invest in apprenticeship, invest in making certain that the vast majority of our people have the capability to participate in what will become a digital economy. We need to do that, and we need to have a sense of urgency to it, which today exists in some incremental ways, but we need to scale it.
We have 2 minutes left, so let's end it on one question that somebody sent in, which is, what's the one thing, if you become mayor, what is the one thing that you will want to look back on and say, I did that?
I want to say that I got people jobs and that they were able to enjoy a life when they had a roof of dignity and food on the table. I want to make sure that if those who want to be homeowners could be homeowners, and those who want to participate in the economy going forward, that I've made it possible for them to do that. So that is a way that changed their lives. I want to make certain that our students in the educational system get the opportunity that I had through education to participate in the economy going forward. So in that we restored some dignity and some relationship of trust between the community and the police, and had those people intervene who could make certain that those who are the least of thee when it comes to mental challenges and mental health care challenges, those people we service. So it is getting people invested in, involved in inclusive comeback. And if that were the legacy here in lives that they could lead with dignity and respect, then that's a legacy that we can all look back to. And I'd be proud of that legacy, improving the lives of those people, especially the least of thee. And that's how I think about it. And that's what this is all about. It ain't about me. This is about we. So given the opportunity to lead, I've stepped up to take that opportunity, because if I can change the lives of a community of people the way my life has been changed, then all of our lives are going to be better.
Ray McGuire, thank you for letting me be in discussion with you. Dorian, thank you for letting me bust into your class of 79 get together.
Please.
Enjoyed it.
Please. Michelle, you were there
Right.
when we were there. So so we welcome this. To all of you who
Well, thank
stayed,
you.
I want to, am I on mute? Can you hear me?
No.
We can
No,
hear
we
you,
can hear
Dorian.
Okay. I want to thank both of you and thank everybody.